Well, good. Well, welcome everybody. We're glad you're here. Welcome to the first of a series of public input sessions from the Friends of Santa Fe Trail to help with the development of our master plan. The Friends of Santa Fe Trail is a nonprofit organization dedicated to raising funds for capital improvement programs and operations related to the Santa Fe Trail, as well as generally supporting and enhancing the trail. The group is committed to preserving the culture of the communities it connects and providing a safe and inviting experience for all trail users. Your participation and help tonight will be vital to developing a long-term vision for the trail that will serve our communities as well as users of the trail for decades to come. So I'm John Sturdivant. I'm the president of the Friends of Santa Fe Trail, and I'm joined tonight by several of our board members, as well as a couple of special guests from Dallas City Hall and Dallas City Council. First, I'd like to introduce Jared White from the Planning and Design Department. Jared, would you like to say a few things?
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, I'm Jared White. I'm actually with the Park and Recreation Department. I'm in the Planning and Design Division. Me and the other staff within that division, we work on projects just like this. We work on master plans for trails and parks and long-range planning. So I'm here tonight to help when I can to answer any questions about process and just observe. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jared. We're also very honored to be joined tonight by two city councilmen, both newly elected. So Councilman Ridley from District 14, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, John. I'm Paul Ridley, newly elected to District 14, representing our area, which includes Old East Dallas, downtown, uptown, and the Oaklawn area. And fortunately, our district includes a stretch of the Santa Fe Trail, which is a critical part of our overall trail system citywide. So I'm very pleased to see that the Friends of the Santa Fe Trail are launching this series of meetings, public meetings, to look at the master plan that they are proposing for the trail. So kudos to them, and I support your efforts.
Thank you, Councilman Ridley. And again, congratulations on your recent election. We are also joined by Councilman Jesse Moreno, who's been a longtime friend of our group as a former Parks Board representative. Councilman Moreno, we're glad you're here. Would you like to say a few words to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Thank you, John. My name is Jesse Moreno. I'm the newly elected council member for District 2. And as many of you know, I am the former Park Board member for District 2. And so I am very familiar with your efforts. We are thrilled to have you as a partner. We have a trail that is built out, but I look very much forward to adding enhancements such as lighting, water features, and just beautifying the trail and adding more accessibility points and making sure that we are paying close attention to those intersections where pedestrians and cyclists are crossing. And it's a top priority of mine that we make those trails safer. So I applaud your efforts and I look forward to continuing to working with you all.
All right. Thank you, Councilman Moreno. And again, congratulations to you as well on your recent election. So now I would like to turn it over to Samuel Mortimer. He is the Vice President of the Friends of Santa Fe Trail and the chair of our Master Plan Committee. He is going to MC our activities for tonight. Samuel?
I appreciate that, John. Thanks everyone for joining tonight, both public, our guests. My name is Samuel Mortimer. I've been on the board of the Santa Fe Trail for 3 years now. I'm functioning as the vice president right now, but primarily overseeing the development of the master plan effort in partnership with our design partner, Studio Outside. So Studio Outside is a landscape architecture firm based on Exposition Avenue, and we're joined tonight by Mike Fraze and Isaac Cohen of Studio Outside, who will be helping in the presentation tonight. They were selected a few years ago through a competitive process, and based on their extensive knowledge and background, putting together these types of plans in conjunction with their close proximity to the southern end of the Santa Fe Trail itself, we thought they were uniquely positioned to help us imagine what the next 5 to 10 years of the Santa Fe Trail and what those improvements could be. So you can see up on the screen kind of an agenda tonight, and I'll walk through a little bit of just the housekeeping front end of how we're going to run the meeting and how we're going to do questions at the end. So introduction, that's what we're doing right now. We're going to jump in to the master plan elements themselves. So we made this clear in some of the emails, some of the correspondence. Tonight, we won't be presenting a formally delineated proposal of these are the kinds of projects or specific projects that are proposing. We want to hear from people first. We don't want to get the cart in front of the horse. We want to hear what's on your mind, what your priorities are. We want to go back to the drawing board and then present that in full later this summer, probably early August, depending on the extent of your comments. So we have a live survey that's going right now. Many of you probably have already seen it. We have over 250 responses to date. We would love to get more. To be honest, that's way more than we thought we were going to get. We're pretty blown away by the response. We'd love to double that. We'd love to triple that. So the more input we can get, the more the trail can really, and this plan can address what your concerns are. So jumping in, we're going to talk about why do we need a master plan, what a master plan is, and specifically what it is not. We'll go through a summary of the process and timeline of how we're doing this. We'll do an analysis or review the analysis that's already done of the state of the trail and the identity of trail and how we see the trail. And then we'll wrap with what we see as the major opportunity areas and study areas where we see low-hanging fruit, both in terms of minor improvements that could happen throughout the trail, but also major project improvements, capital investments that could be made over the next 5 to 10 years. From there, we're going to open the floor to you, the trail community, to ask us questions about the trail, about the master plan, about the process, the things that you want to know and the things that concern you. So we have some pre-submitted questions about, I think we got something like 17, 18 questions, some of which there was some overlap, some of which I think we're going to answer in the presentation itself. If you feel like you submitted a question and we didn't answer it, please use the chat box, use the Q&A box as part of the webinar and submit your question. Amanda is going to be managing both the chat and the questions just to make sure that while the presenters are talking that we're not missing what you're saying. So please feel free to engage with us in any way possible. And we'll say this multiple times throughout this process, but please feel free to reach out to us on social media, through our email, through our website, through our surveys. We want to hear from you. And this is just one step along the way of putting this plan together. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Fraze with Studio Outside, who's going to talk a little bit more about why we need a master plan and what it can do for us.
Great. Well, thank you, Samuel. Yeah, exactly right. We are Studio Outside, just briefly. We're a landscape architecture and planning firm. And like you mentioned, Samuel, we're just outside of Fair Park off Exposition. So this project is kind of near and dear to us, not just because we love to do this type of work, but also, you know, many of our employees are users of this trail. And so there's already an emotional connection and an interest in this. So we're very happy to be a part of the team. So, you know, why master plan? You know, why is a master plan so important? In our minds, a master plan allows us and allows friends of Santa Fe Trail to be very proactive in the way that we look at this trail in terms of its entire sequencing. It allows us to establish a framework that outlines opportunities, amenities, both small and large, that can occur along the actual trail in a way that can be strategic. So it's not just kind of piece by piece, and when an opportunity comes up, this allows us to take an opportunity and strategically look at how it gets created. It also allows us to look at how the entire trail can be experienced as a sequence through a variety of different communities and different areas of the city, so that it actually becomes more than just a connection. It becomes a whole sequence of experiences and recreation, and ties and builds off of other contextual relationships, so that the experience is even bigger, both for people that are on the trail, but also those communities, those businesses, and those other open spaces and green spaces that may sit next to the trail itself. Samuel, I may have you go one more slide forward. What I wanted to talk about, and you actually queued me up perfect on this, when we were talking about listening and how important this session is. We apply, when we do master planning, we look at it as kind of a look, listen, and learn process before we actually start to design. So you're exactly right. A lot of what we're going to share to date is really based on just the look part, and the listen part is absolutely critical in terms of the feedback and the questions we're going to get. But in terms of look, if you kind of look at this diagram that we have on the top here, you know, over in the kind of orange, there's a whole list of site assessments. This is some of a much larger list of elements that we look at when we analyze and assess the existing conditions of the trail. The ecology, you know, where do we have shade? Where do we don't have shade? Where do we have erosion? The context, you know, where are existing open spaces? How do we and where do we connect with surrounding neighborhoods? And that actually even relates to the history. What are some of the interesting elements that sit along this trail that talk about the history of this space, like an old rail trestle and things like that, that can be really found iconic elements that tell an even greater story that may not be seen today, but could be expressed through the trail. Obviously, the social infrastructure and the physical infrastructure, you know, the condition of the trail, where it's really good, where we might have some visibility issues, some tight turns and things like that. All of those are pieces that we start to assess, and in addition to opportunities to connect to a much greater and larger system, which would be the communities around us. Our next step in that, the listen component, is one of these sessions, one of many of these sessions of stakeholder input, where we really want to hear from all of our partners in this, the city of Dallas, the surrounding businesses, the Friends of Santa Fe Trail, but also the neighborhoods and the community. And that's why this is such a vital process, is to kind of hear those questions, hear those concerns, hear those aspirations of what you want to see realized within the trail, things that you love, things that you would love to see, and things that you would like to see addressed or mitigated through the master plan. Those all become the foundational elements that allow us to test the work that we do as we proceed forward with an actual master plan. So as you look at all these series of circles that go off to the right on the screen, program study to site use scenarios to master plan to the final design implementation, you'll see the series of kind of green arrows that go through. What that's saying is that the information that we've gathered on site, and especially the information that we gather through these kind of forums, will become the litmus test to all those ideas. And they start to help us establish priorities. They help us confirm master plan recommendations. And then they also even help us in terms of understanding phasing and priorities as it relates to realized amenities. And so those are absolutely key critical components in our process. Now, Samuel, I think you wanted to talk a little bit about kind of where we're sitting in the schedule today.
Yeah, I'm off mute now. All right, so thank you, Mike. Where are we sitting right now? So you can see on our little bar chart down here, we're breaking this down into 4 distinct phases. The analysis, some of the early thought process about where are the opportunities, that has been completed, and that's what we're going to be reviewing this evening. Now begins a process of this feedback loop and feeding back in stakeholder input, community input, business input, neighborhood groups, City of Dallas, city staff, etc. So it's a multi-step process, and it's starts right now. This is the first presentation, and your feedback will go into analysis. We'll go through the surveys. We've integrated things like what street do you live on? What zip code do you live in? So that we can plot those sorts of things out and determine, hey, it looks like we're getting a lot of input from up here, but not from down here. Let's go table on that location over the next weekend. Let's ask our neighborhood groups that work there, our city council people that rep those people, how do we reach more people in this area? Those are the sorts of validation tools we're using to make sure that we're getting an equitable and spread out input source, because we are a 4.5 mile long linear trail and we touch a lot of neighborhoods. So from there, early August, we're aiming to have another presentation after that first round of input has been analyzed, fed back into this machine. We want to present in significantly more detail delineated project proposals of what we would like to see in the next 5 to 10 years. There'll be another feedback process very similar to this. We'll have another presentation. You'll see all these same faces again. we'll have a different separate survey. We'll be asking different questions about very specific things that are in the proposal and getting your feedback. Based on what your feedback is, do you love it? Do you hate every bit of it? The results of that will determine whether or not we need to add a third feedback loop potentially. And we'll be consulting with city park staff, stakeholder groups, or city council members to determine whether or not we've reached a point where we're ready to eventually submit the plan for formal adoption by the City of Dallas Parks Board, and then eventually have the plan adopted and begin prioritizing, fundraising, and implementing projects. So that's where we are. We're at the beginning of feedback loop 1. We've got a multi-month process that we're intending to focus on the rest of the summer and into early fall. This is our main priority as a board, as a nonprofit organization, until it is complete. We hope that that is early September, but we're going to chase this input wherever it takes us, and we're going to chase your concerns wherever they lead us. So I want to thank everybody again for being here. And with that, I'd like to jump into some of the initial analysis and start talking about what we see as the big opportunities. So Studio Outside began this process by looking at what is the context of the trail. Again, this is a 4.5 mile linear trail. They looked at things like, what are the existing parks? The trail is a City of Dallas Park and Recreation asset. There are a lot of parks along the way that have some of the similar assets that we might have, some assets that we don't have. We obviously don't have a golf course. We don't have a playground, but we're adjacent to these sorts of things. So we can kind of count them as there's a symbiosis of their location along the trail, and where we're uniquely situated next to specific assets. That's something that we can play off of. Do we need to grab it in a different way? Do we need to interact with that asset in a different way? These are sorts of things that Studio Outside was looking at. Things like portals, connections, trail openings. So we've gotten a lot of feedback already about trail crossings, what our trailheads are like, what the gateways are like. And again, with the 4.5 mile trail that traverses the amount of neighborhoods that we do, there's a lot of different intersections, and they all have a very different character. There's dark crossings, there's sidewalk crossings, there's vehicle crossings, there's stop signs, there's yield signs. There's any number of different ways you can cross or onboard the trail, and going through these and analyzing them and looking for weaknesses, places that it could be improved, but also things that we're doing right was a critical part of Studio Outside's initial analysis. Existing commercial areas. We know that there's a lot of commercial traffic along the trail. Sometimes it's directly fronting on the trail. Other times we're relying on neighborhood connections to access those assets. So identifying where those areas are and how we can strengthen those connections, whether they are physically connected or whether it's sort of more of a phenomenological, we need to improve wayfinding to get to these places. We need better partnerships with these businesses in order to cross promote our mutual interest. These sorts of things were all examined. There's a lot of schools along the trail. On the southern end, Baylor obviously is at the southernmost end of the Deep Elm trailhead. Woodrow Wilson, J.L. Long, Mata, there's a lot of schools along the trail, a lot of use by these schools along the trail. We've gotten a lot of feedback about specific times of the day when you can almost see a commuter traffic of people going to and from various schools. This is the kinds of things that if you didn't live in this neighborhood, we wouldn't know. So it's this sort of direct input from you, the trail community, to tell us, we use this trail every morning to walk to school, or we ride our bike here in the afternoon, but we notice that these are issues during this times of the day. That's the kind of feedback we'd like to hear from you. And plotting out where these sorts of schools are and where these assets are was another critical component of this analysis. Another comment we heard quite a bit from in the initial survey responses was, how are we connecting to other trails? We do benefit quite a lot from connections to adjacent trails, specifically the White Rock Trail, Sopac Trail on the north end. As many of you know, the Trinity Spine Trail is about to begin construction as part of the larger loop system, as well as some on-street complete street efforts on the southern end through Deep Ellum, but also the Abrams Columbia Main Street districts. So these types of assets all need to be looked at. Neighborhoods. This one is sort of an all-encompassing thing we needed to look at because there's so many neighborhoods. There's a wide range of economic diversity, language diversity. Lot sizes are different. The way that they front the trail is different. And it defines in a lot of ways the character of the various neighborhoods, of how the trail moves through them, how safe people feel, how the trail gets used different times of day. So a very important piece when considering the master plan. And with that, I'm going to kick it back over to Mike and Isaac, who are going to talk a little bit about how these analyses start to form what we see as the planning framework and the identity of the Santa Fe Trail itself.
Thanks so much, Samuel. If you go to the next slide, we'll jump right in. I think one of the first things that we talked about with the Friends group and asked them was, what is that identity of the Santa Fe Trail? And one of our goals being that if you say, meet me at the Santa Fe Trail to anyone in the city or to a visitor to the city, they have an idea in their head of what they're going to find. They understand that it's a place that they're going to come for recreation, that they might use it for transportation between different parts of the city, and that it's a cultural asset that connects major regional amenities, commercial and residential hubs. And that above all, it's a linkage between nature and culture within the city from White Rock Lake to Deep Ellum. So that identity really comes down to three things we thought: of longevity, experience, and character. Next slide. When we talk about longevity, it's really about how do local residents and visitors enjoy their time on the trail and making sure that they plan to return. So we think about that in terms of comfort. We want to make sure that everyone is comfortable using the trail, that they have the amenities they need. We think about safety, so ensuring that everyone that uses the trail has a safe experience no matter what time of day they're using the trail or what their use of the trail is, whether that's walking to and from school or on a long recreational bike ride. And then we think about maintenance. So what are the activities that need to happen to ensure that the trail is sustainable long-term, that it looks good on a daily and weekly basis, and that it supports an ecology that's really truly unique to the neighborhoods it passes through and to Dallas itself. Next slide. We also think about experience. So what are the unique things that you come across along the trail, whether it's this really amazing bicycle art fence that's up against the trail, or it's the different kind of new interventions that might come out of the master plan? Do we think about the history of the Santa Fe Trail as an old rail line and what that means and how that contributes to the identity? Or is it some new set of materials, different colors, different pavers that provide an accent that really someone says, you know, I know where that picture was taken, that's on the Santa Fe Trail, because they can identify the different materials and the different kind of icons along the way. Making sure that there's ample amenities so that everyone has a place to sit, rest in the shade, find water, find a place to park their bike. Maybe it's the tool rack so you can fix your bike along the trail, but making sure that those are readily accessible, that they're in working condition, that everyone is being able to use those as they pass through the trail. And then finally, thinking about entertainment value. What makes the Santa Fe Trail truly unique? Where can we add custom elements that are only found on the Santa Fe Trail? What are those experiences in the city of Dallas that you can only have on the Santa Fe Trail? You know, when you tell your friends from a different city or that are coming into town, we're going to go to the Santa Fe Trail and we're going to do this thing that only happens here and it's only happening this weekend. So you got to come experience this with us. The master plan really sets the stage for those truly unique elements that will come. We know that everyone loves the trail already. It's heavily used. But what's that iconic element that comes along where everyone in the city knows that's the Santa Fe Trail? I have to go there this weekend. Next page. And then finally, what is that kind of identity of the trail today? What defines that trail physically and ecologically? And through that analysis, we identified 3 sections. The northern section, which we coined the forest and wild edge of the trail, where there's dense tree canopy, forest edges, and stream corridors that'll connect into that Trinity Spine Trail and connect all the way down to the Trinity River. The central area of the trail that we've termed the prairie, which is more open. There are more areas where you can have certain moments of shade with the new tree planting that's occurring, but also how do we bring out the blackland prairie that once existed in this region and really amplify that native ecology to create something truly unique and special. And then finally, the southern end of the trail, which is much more urban and going to be a much more densely built part of the trail where we have several bridges that pass over streets where we're connecting into Deep Ellum and to Fair Park. So together, how do these 3 areas really kind of come together to inform choices that are made, whether that's through tree planting or planting of prairie species or the construction of new iconic elements? How do we inform this through what's existing today and the places that people love today, and really these 3 areas that will contribute to that ongoing identity? So our goal is to take these kind of 3 things, longevity, experience, and character, and to really think about these 3 lenses for every choice that we make going back as we make design decisions and really think about what those key elements are through the course of the planning process.
And so when we take those elements that come out of those 3 kind of characteristics of longevity, character, and entertainment, we kind of break those into kind of 3 zones of scale. The first of which is trail-wide improvements, and these are elements that would occur throughout the entire length of the trail. Things that deal with safety, elements that deal with wayfinding. There could be art elements, planting and ecology, creating shade. That whole composition that Isaac just spoke about the urban and the prairie and the forest and how those all come together, but also just the basic amenities that really just kind of support activities on the trail. Things like seating, drinking fountains. How do we deal with trash? How do we provide with shade? Those are all what we would kind of consider trail-wide amenities that would be applied over the entire run of the trail. A second category of elements that would be experienced would be the notion of gateways and trailheads, things that speak to identity, things that speak to wayfinding, connections both onto the trail from other neighborhoods, other developments, other parks, but also the reverse of celebrating those connection points from the trail to those items so that there is some legibility and a sense of hierarchy and discovery and connection throughout. And then the third element are kind of what we call these major elements or major moments that are more iconic in nature and destinational in nature that could happen along the trail. These would not necessarily happen, holistically along 4.5 miles, but at key points along that 4.5 mile trail series of segments where we could have larger moments of entertainment value, plazas, gathering spaces, moments that really start to kind of create this connectivity and connection along the trail itself of different spaces and lead to that discovery experience again. And so, Samuel, I think you were actually going to talk about maybe some of these opportunities that we see or you see along the trail for some of those iconic moments.
Yes. So we've identified 7 areas we think would be key for these major interventions, major opportunity project scale capital improvements. The first one, Tokelon Trailhead on the north end, and I'm just going to go through these one by one. So on the north end, at the intersection of Sopak Trail and White Rock Trail, is the Tokelon Park Trailhead. So in general, in these next few slides, you'll see some photos of the existing conditions and then some inspiration images that they aren't supposed to be specific proposals per se, as much as things we think fit the scale of the place as it exists, things we think could be potential improvements that would solve known issues, maybe solve or create new opportunities. So what's a Tokelon Park trailhead now? There's some sense of, where do I park to get up here? How do I get up to the trail? You get these little rabbit trails leading up the hill. When you're coming off of SOPAC or coming from around White Rock Lake, if you're familiar with the trail, which many of you on this call probably are, that's why you're here, you probably know this is the start of the White Rock Trail, or I'm sorry, the Santa Fe Trail. Many people don't, though. Many people would assume that this is just a continuation of the White Rock Trail. They probably don't even know that SOPAC Trail is technically on the west side of the lake. So we see this as a major opportunity for wayfinding, for identity, for branding, but also easing the access, creating a rest and water stop, a collaboration opportunity with our fellow friends groups that are working in this area. This is a major opportunity zone where we think we can work together to better this area. The old rail bridge. So Mike specifically mentioned this about the iconic places. Isaac mentioned it too. Meet me at the Santa Fe Trail. This is probably one of the key areas that anybody that's been on the Santa Fe Trail would know where the old rail bridge is. So what are the opportunities here? We think there could be increased seating. We think there could be shade opportunities. We think there could be a gathering space down here. In general, we'd love to see the bridge celebrated in some form or fashion. The Grand Avenue overpass. So at MATA, there's a lot of traffic from the school coming in here. We've got a great connection opportunity to the Samuel Grant Tennyson Park here. There's residential neighborhoods. Lindsley Park is just around the corner. We see the opportunity here for an event plaza, for increased planting, for seating opportunities. There's already some benches there, but how can we make it better? How can we make it not just sort of a rundown state highway overpass? Brookside Overpass, if you're familiar with our group, if you've been interacting with us in the past year and a half, you know we've hosted an event or two here. Specifically, we recently cut the ribbon for a mural we've put here. Very interested in the potential to use this dead end as some kind of an event plaza. But in general, we think that there's a lot of opportunity here for tying into the small creek and wash that's directly adjacent, additional and better rest areas, opportunities for water. This is a major neighborhood onboarding point, and we want to make sure that we're making the most of that opportunity. Just around the corner, but in a lot of ways with a very different feel, the Glasgow Trailhead is also a major onboarding location for this neighborhood. There's been a lot of discussion of this area in the past year. I'm sure many of you, if you're interested enough to come to our meeting tonight, you were probably interested enough to come out last September during the talks about the stadium and the surface park in this area. There's been a lot of feedback already on this. We want to continue that process, build on that process, and reach a solution that's amicable and addresses all the concerns. There's a lot of possibility here, and we have our ears open, and we want to hear what you think this space should be, because there's so much potential. And then finally, the T intersection at the far southern end of the trail. We see a lot of opportunity here to create a destination to bring people to the southern end of the trail to help embrace sort of the arts and culture of the Deep Elm and Fair Park neighborhood. There's definitely a lot of opportunity here for better plantings, for potential pocket parks. And that kind of leads us into the two gateways at the end. On the west side, Deep Elm, on the right side, Fair Park. How do those intersections work? How do they get reorganized? The Fair Park intersection in particular is one of the more difficult study areas that's going to require an extensive partnership with DART, City of Dallas Transportation, City of Dallas Parks, Fair Park First. These are areas that we want to bring up to the level of standard and quality that people on the northern end of the trail enjoy to a certain degree already, and make the southern end of the trail an area where people feel like they can onboard and offboard safely, but also that there's a reason to go there. And then some of these more trail-wide opportunities, these are all obviously inspiration images. None of these things are currently found on the trail, but opportunities for large-scale major art, super graphics, murals, wayfinding, the sorts of things that can start to create an identity of the trail, but also create a destination appeal. And in a very broad general comment, safety improvements throughout the trail, whether that's improving sidewalks, signal crossings, increased lighting, wayfinding is in a lot of ways part of this as well. So this is something that is on our mind and that would be implemented in much higher degree throughout the trail. And from there, this is where you come in. We have a lot of ideas. We have a lot of, we've done a lot of analysis. We've thought a lot about what the trail needs, where the major zones are that we think these kinds of improvements can be made. But we're, like I mentioned, here to listen and want to serve you, the trail community, because that's who we are. That's who the Friends of Santa Fe Trail is. We're made up of volunteers. We're a nonprofit. Our interest is of the trail. We want to promote the trail. We want to make it as best as it can be. So we have some questions that have already been submitted. I see there's starting to be some questions coming in. A small reiteration first, just of the schedule before we start jumping in a little bit. This is the completion of the analysis phase. We're in feedback loop 1. We'll be having presentations, surveys, tabling on the trail, and we'll be giving a much more detailed presentation, probably early August, but depends on the extent of the feedback we receive, where we'll really get into these proposals and what we would formally propose at these major opportunity zones in early August. So with that said, I will open it up to some of these questions. Let me pull up the pre-selected ones here. And to answer a general question that was made, this presentation, the slides will be made available publicly. We're going to post them on our Linktree, and the Q&A we'll type up and put on our Linktree as well, just so everyone has access to this. I apologize, I need to open my questions here. All right. So I'm just going to kind of start with the first one up at the top here. Well, let me actually back up. Mike, Isaac, does anybody have any additional comments they want to make before we start jumping in and opening the floor up?
I mean, actually, Samuel, I think you did a really good job of kind of covering it. I think actually the questions will probably expand a little bit more of any areas as we start to get into them. But I think it was a good overview of what we've done today.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to jump in here first. I've got a question from Daniel Church. He's asking, at the Brookside Overpass, have there been conversations with the city about converting the dead-end drive into a public park gathering space? So, Daniel, I'm happy to turn you on here to chat if you've got some, if you want to follow up on that in any way. But yes, that is definitely a conversation that we've begun having with the city. It's something we're interested in. A lot of these things, because we're so close to completing our master plan, being at this point, the city's point of view has been go through the input process. Let's revisit these things. This is one of the ideas in particular that we think would be a great first project, because we know there's a lot of stakeholders that are interested in this project. We've done some test events in the area. There don't seem to be a lot of roadblocks to implementing that at Brookside Bridge. We'd love to chase that to its bitter end and hopefully a conclusion that means that dead end can have some parking, could have some gathering space, some trees. We're just gonna have to see what happens. And again, as part of that, we're here to listen and to hear what you think. So glad to hear that Daniel votes yes for that. Would love to hear what other people might think. I mean, please reply in the chat. Would you like to see that at Brookside Plaza? Would that be a good idea? What kind of things would you like to see if we did put an event plaza here? That would be really great. Gerald Bell, I've got a question. Are there plans to link the southern end of the trail with downtown? If so, oh, I'm sorry, that's from Barbara. That's a great question. And we did have quite a lot of, we had a lot of comments in the survey responses about the extent that Santa Fe Trail would potentially expand in scope. How would we connect to other trails? So at the moment, we don't have any explicit intentions to expand the trail itself in terms of adding additional miles. Probably the best comment I could give you back would be that we see a possibility of sort of expanding through association and through connections through other trails, through complete street projects, through better wayfinding, through better awareness of the trail itself. I believe, is Jared still on? Jared White. Jared,
Yeah, I'm here.
Could you talk a little bit more about the Complete Streets effort on commerce and just the Deep Ellum multimodal transportation in general and kind of what the current status of that is?
Right. So quick context for those on the call. So if you're wondering why the parks guy is going to be talking about street stuff. Before I came back to the park department, I was employed here several years ago. I went to what is now the city's Department of Transportation, where I ran the city's bike program and their Complete Streets program. So a lot of these projects, I was on the beginning stages for the preliminary planning and preliminary design. So the initial thought was to, with the Commerce Street Complete Street project, which is from Exposition to Good Latimer, was to narrow the roadway down like on Elm Street. But then we were talking to the Deep Ellum Foundation, and they're like, well, can we get bike lanes through here? So we started looking at, well, how do we get bike lanes through the Deep Ellum area and into downtown? We went through that process, and then as the design kept progressing, we had neighborhood community input meetings, and the decision was made to not do the bike lanes on Commerce, and it was actually to maximize the sidewalk space along there. So we've had to kind of rethink how those connections are going to be. Again, I haven't been in this role for quite some time. So this has been like 2 to 3 years ago now that I was part of these conversations. So this might be something that I can follow up with our Department of Transportation and Public Works Department. But that was the original idea, was you would transition off Santa Fe Trail, then you could slip into a two-way bike lane on Commerce Street, which would then take you into downtown. For anyone who's been in the downtown area, some of these bike lanes are already popping up on Commerce. So from Good Latimer over to, I think it's Cesar Chavez, there's a two-way bike lane on the south side of the street. For those following the development of new buildings downtown, there's the East Quarter. It's a new high-rise that's over on Jackson between Pearl and Cesar Chavez. They are building the continuation of that bike lane in front of their development. And the idea was to keep marching that downtown through AT&T and over to the Trinity. So there's pieces that are already coming to be. It's just that with the design decisions that were being made in Deep Ellum, we have to really rethink how do you get through Deep Ellum now if you're just typically on street and don't have a bike lane. But this is something I can follow up with, talk to the actual project manager on where they're at and what their construction timeline is.
Thank you, Jared. That was much better answer than I could have given. I really appreciate it. Another question from Gerald here. Why can't cars also have stop signs at any of the southern street crossings of the Santa Fe Trail? We got this question several times in our survey responses as well. That's definitely something we're interested to know more about. A lot of these intersection questions come down to a matter of how many people are going to line up on one side that says we want a stop sign and how many people are lining up on the side that says we don't want a stop sign. Great example, Lindsley Park. A stop sign was recently added that many of you might be aware of. They had a public meeting hosted by then Councilman David Blewett and his staff. I believe there were 4 people that showed up to weigh in on whether there should be a stop sign there, of which I think 2 of them were from our board. So as you can imagine, the 4 people that showed up said, we want a stop sign. and that happened relatively quickly. So to a certain degree, it's a matter of telling us where you think the major issues are, and that can be put in motion to a degree. We can help lend our voice either to you, or you can lend your voice to us. So in particular, where you're talking about the Southern Street crossings, which I've got them written down here, I think you're looking at, oh gosh, look down and I can't find it. Maybe Fitzhugh. I can't remember the exact streets, but it raises up. It's a little bit of a hump right there. Some of that is just always going to be a little bit difficult. There are some stop signs there, and it's kind of a matter of driver education. So some of it might be not necessarily a stop sign, but it could be, how do we make the trail more visible? And part of that is not just physically visible, but more visible to the community as a whole, so that the people driving in the area know that this is the Santa Fe Trail, and when you go this way, you're going to cross over it. So there's a lot of different ways to approach that, but we're definitely very interested to know what you all think are dangerous or compromised intersections, or one way or another, which is a great lead into a question I had via the internet, via the surveys, that was, is the trail safe in all areas? So that's obviously a pretty loaded question. The answer would be, we think the trail is safe in all areas, but we do hear the feedback that the trail community thinks that there are certain areas of the trail at certain times of day that they don't want to go to. And we hear that, we understand that. So of the 250 responses that we've received so far to our survey, by far the number one area that you have asked us to prioritize in terms of improvements is safety. That's where you thought we could make the most improvement. So I don't want to mince words when I say we're listening, we hear you. You have spoken very loudly so far, and I don't anticipate that dropping from number one in the next 2 weeks that survey is open. So we're very interested in continuing that conversation, and please feel free to use the chat. Feel free to use the survey to tell us areas that you think could be improved one way or another, or areas that you think are doing something right. That could even be on another trail. A great example being, let's say, the Katy Trail, where they separate bike lanes and pedestrian traffic in certain areas. We know that there are certain downhills that people don't like the speed of bicyclists and feel a little bit less than comfortable sharing lanes with them. If you think that that's an issue and you have a specific area you're concerned about, put that in the chat, put that in our survey. We'd love to know where you think those areas are that could be improved. Another question that came in via our surveys, Isaac, Mike, I'm going to kick this one to you. It's, how do we more economically and ecologically deal with erosion, flooding, plastic pollution due to counterproductive mowing?
I can kind of start, and I know, Isaac, you have some thoughts on that as well. I think, some of that is just really looking at our spaces in our landscape beyond the trail, our drainage patterns that are happening with those, and then being just creative of how we address those. Some of that could be handled by planting of native plants, which I saw a question earlier about, mowing and extensive mowing and things like that. I think those two ideas can actually kind of work together. That has to be balanced with maintenance for sure, and safety as well. But I think there are definitely, we have experienced with a lot of good successes where we could use, native plants and grasses and things like that to kind of shore up erosion. That's definitely opportunities and methods that are available for us. The same is true with just looking at how water flows and understanding drainage patterns that are coming towards the trail, and then looking at how we mitigate those and move water in a safe way to where it needs to head without creating flooding or ponding or things like that, which also can tie in all honesty, can tie into the beautifying of the trail as well. These don't just have to be infrastructure elements. They can also be beautifying elements if done thoughtfully and well. Isaac, you probably have some other thoughts on that as well, so I don't want to dominate the question.
No, I think I'll just add that, you saw the very large scale analysis that we've done. We've also done the smaller scale analysis, identifying the areas where there is erosion, where there are lower areas where we could do something like a rain garden to really enhance that local habitat and ecological value, but really create something beautiful. So we've done a lot more kind of in-depth looking at some of those issues, and we'll have recommendations on everything from maintenance and how to maintain specific areas to where everything like a rain garden or wetland planting might go that can help reduce flooding by creating a more naturalized zone. So we're looking at all of those in a much finer detail.
Awesome. And I'll tag on to that question, because this is definitely something we've heard a lot of feedback on in general through our social media, word of mouth, about our native wildflower area between Beacon and Woodrow Wilson Park, Willis Winters Park. There's definitely a lot of opinions about what's the best way to manage that. Where, as the Friends of the Santa Fe Trail, to be like really honest and straightforward, we are not the experts on black prairie native grass restoration maintenance. We are looking to the experts to help us make that decision. So we are in the process of organizing a short little educational site visit with the City of Dallas urban biologist. His name is, oh no, I'm gonna forget. Brett. Anybody? Brett.
Brett Johnson.
Brett Johnson. Thank you. We're in the process of organizing a site visit with him that we'd like to invite everybody to attend. Again, there's a lot of opinions about how to best manage this. We are not reporting, and we don't want to be the experts of how that happens. What we want is a great, healthy native landscape there that makes people feel comfortable and provides a variety of experiences and ecological diversity along the trail. How that gets executed in partnership with the City of Dallas and their maintenance team is an open question for us. And we want to make sure that you know that we're listening to you when you say this isn't the way to do that, because we want to do it the right way, but we're also not in charge of mowing it. So please stand by, keep watching our social media channels. That's something we're actively organizing right now and hope to be able to tell you more about later on this summer. So with that, let's see. I've got another question from online here that I'll answer. Came in via our surveys. When will this begin, and what opportunities are there to participate? So as Mike noted in the beginning about what a master plan is, this is a planning framework. This isn't necessarily packaged turnkey projects that are ready to start once we get that potential approval this fall. One sort of hitching phrase that you can use to describe it is, this is a guidepost, it's not a hitching post. So there's a lot of thinking and planning and project development to do even after the master plan is formally adopted by the Parks Board. There's a lot of feedback to happen even before that. So how do these projects become real? The major opportunities, the major projects will require extensive additional public input. In particular, any projects that go in for potential bond funding or City of Dallas matches, or looking for private funding from elsewhere. That funding word is very important. So these all still need to be fundraised for. They still need a lot of development before they become real, which is not to say that we're not excited about them or that we shouldn't be planning for them, but just want to put that out there that this is the first step in a rather long process to see these things through to fruition. But with that said, in terms of how can you engage, how can you help with these projects? Obviously, helping fund the projects is great. Helping give us your input about how the projects should be organized, what you want to see, that's great. I think the comment was specifically about how they can be engaged with some of the work. We're going to be going through City of Dallas processes throughout this process in terms of contracts and negotiations. So that's definitely more of a City of Dallas question than a Friends of Santa Fe Trail question. But I think that answers the question to whoever asked that. And if you want to follow up and that was your question, please add something in the comments. I do have another question here. Is Councilman Ridley or Moreno still around?
Yes, I'm still in.
I've got a question here that I would love for you to answer if you're amenable. So we had a question that why are so many projects from the last bond package, why have they not been executed yet? So if you could walk through it, maybe just tell us a little bit more about how bond funding works and how that sort of what could be perceived as a lag in progress, how that money gets allocated and then sort of makes its way to projects before it eventually sort of ends up with a playground that someone's children can come play at, and explain just a little bit more about how that process works and how it might work for the Santa Fe Trail.
Well, it's a multi-year process to begin with. The bond issue was approved in the fall of 2017, and it contained over $600 million for various infrastructure projects. The city can't get all of those projects done the following year. The volume is just too great. And so that's why it takes several years to go through a multi-step process. Once they have the financing, they then have to do design work in many cases for the actual projects, engineering the public improvements, streets, trails, whatever the project may be. And to do that, they have to let contracts with external consultants, the engineering firms that will actually do that work. And they have to put together a whole package of projects that they let at the same time to the same design consultant. And that takes some time. They then have to have the time to do the design work. And then the city, when they were, after they've reviewed and approved the plans, they then have to put it out to bid. And that can be a many-month project. Then they get the bids back. They go through the bid selection process to pick the lowest, most responsive bidder. And then they have to get the construction underway. But the capacity of the system doesn't allow them to do $600 million worth of construction all in 1 year. And what they do is spread that out over 5 years. And the city manager has pledged to spend all of the bond funds from this bond issue within 5 years, which will be coming up next year. Actually, the system didn't get started until 2018 because the bond issue, I think, was in November of 17. And so the plan is that they will be spending $177 million each of the next 3 fiscal years, culminating in 2023. And that's why there are still a lot of projects that haven't begun yet because they're in process, one of these stages or another. But that is the plan, to spend that $177 million over the next 3 years for the next bond issue, which is now proposed for 2024.
And I'll just add that in the chat, I went ahead and put in the updated projects where we're at on the bond. So you can go directly to that website and see if a project is under construction, if it's completed, the status of that particular project. And if you have one in particular, please feel free to reach out to our office and we can get an update for you.
I really appreciate both your comments. Again, much more thorough and accurate than I could have ever arrived at. So thank you very much. There's a question here in the chat box about, is there opportunity for tactical urbanism to get communities, schools, for example, involved in developing the identity trail? I can give you a great example of things that we are doing right now, things that we're hoping to do in the future, and hoping to set a bit of a precedent for these types of relationships and partnerships. So our upcoming project that hopefully you'll be hearing more about soon is we're partnering with the Cedars Union, who has acquired a grant from the City of Dallas Arts and Culture, and they're going to be doing a series of 3 murals on the southern end of the trail in partnership with Dallas Stage Scenery. So this is pretty much right at the T intersection. They are hosting a week-long class for high school students, and they have 3 professional artists, professional muralists, who will be guiding groups of 2 or 3 students each to paint 3 adjacent murals next to each other on the Dallas Stage Scenery building. So this is a really great example of the kinds of projects that we feel like the Santa Fe Trail could be a great conduit to finding these types of groups of people that are looking to improve the community, looking to improve their local neighborhood, their commute to work, what have you. In particular, we're excited about seeing this on the southern end of the trail, where we're really close to Deep Elm, we're close to Fair Park, and creating more of this sort of art stretch corridor through that area. So we're looking for more partnerships like this with Woodrow Wilson High School. We've had some discussions with JL Long, and we'd love to continue these types of partnerships. And we're always looking for new partners. So if your organization, if your business, if your school, if your neighborhood group would like to get involved with our organization and look for these types of opportunities, shoot us an email, send us something in the chat. We'd love to know more about what you think these kinds of partnerships could look like. And I love the phrase technical urbanism. And I think that there's a lot of great opportunities along the trail where we can execute those sorts of things. What else do we have here? Oh, John, I'm gonna lob you one here. So there's a question, the previous lot location, how do we ensure that the new project, the trailhead development, doesn't negatively impact the trail and the trail community? Would you mind taking that one, John?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and one that has been has taken up a lot of thought and time on our side to make sure that that development is something that is positive for the trail and all trail users. We have been working very closely with the developer of that project for the last several months to really understand what their vision is and what they're trying to build, and also make sure that they are giving back to the trail and all trail users, not just for their residents. So we are in the process of drafting a memorandum of understanding with them, which is a non-binding document, but it is something that is in writing from that developer that has their commitments to invest in the trail and help make it a safer place and a more hospitable place. There have been a lot of questions tonight about access to the trail. This would solve some of those problems. There have been questions about safety. This would solve some of those problems. So we are in trying to hold them accountable, and we'll continue to try to hold them accountable for what they have said they will do for making the trail a better place for all users. Councilman Ridley, Councilman Moreno, we also look forward to working with you two on that front as well to make sure that they hold up their end of the bargain.
Got a question here. Curious if back chain link fence prevents wildlife movement. Christy, I'm not exactly sure where in particular we're talking about. I can speak to a few areas, in particular at the Dallas Yardworks Park. We're very interested in removing the fence in that area to create sort of more of a continuity between that City of Dallas Park and the Santa Fe Trail, which is also technically a City of Dallas Park. Do chain link fences prevent wildlife movement? In general, I'd probably say yes, but mostly because I don't necessarily know where you're looking at, but certain fences are definitely necessary. For example, at the T intersection along the Dart line, there's safety issues at play. There's some private property rules where people can have a fence along their shared property line along the trail, and there's nothing we can really do about that. But in general, we're all for bringing down those barriers where it makes sense so that these sort of ecological pathways and communities can sort of coalesce. And the old East Dallas Yard Park is a great example of where we think there's a fence that could come down. And a winning example would be at Willis Winters Park, Randall Park. We weren't part of this process. One of our board members' husbands was pretty involved in this, but taking down fences adjacent to the trail to get into the park, it's such a different experience now that you can sort of filter through there more easily. So a great example of a win to accomplish these sorts of things, although probably a little bit different than what you're getting at with wildlife movement. But great question just the same. And if there are areas that you're interested in, please put those in the chat. Please tell us more specifically. We'd love to hear more of your comments. Another question here about, I'm just going to do these from the top. Is there an awareness of the homeless issue at the southern end of the trail? If so, what's the plan to help and or dissipate? If not, you need to go down there. I can tell you, I'm personally a downtown resident. I onboard the trail. I ride it at least once a week, usually 2 or 3, 4 times a week. I'm intimately aware of the population issue down there, people living in and around the trail. There's safety concerns. There's a lot of garbage. It's something we work closely with Dallas 311 when we see or hear that there's becoming an issue. To a certain degree, that's it's a little beyond our control, to be honest. It's something that we're actively working with, though, and we think to a certain degree, more people we put on the trail, more lights and bikes and bodies that go by there, some of these issues work themselves out. But this is a great example of something that we're going to need to work with all of our council people to solve this issue, because it is a big issue and it's happening in multiple places along the trail, not specific to the southern end by any means. So if you see these kinds of issues or you feel like you're not safe, Dallas 311, if you get in touch with us, that's typically what we do. If it's a longer term problem becoming more serious, we have more direct channels that we can go through. Please reach out to us. People often do. But that's what we do, and we recommend the same. If you see an issue along the trail, is call Dallas 311 or 911 if it necessitates it. But that's the typical conduit to solve those types of problems in the very, very, very short term. So, great question. At the top here, is there a way to avoid placing artificial lights and irrigation along the trail? These measures are not necessary here in Dallas, since we must have lights on our bikes. Cost of lighting and irrigation is high. The development will ruin the natural beauty of the trail and prevent native vegetation from thriving as it once did on prairie not long ago. There's some follow-up here with a few folks about safety requirements for pedestrians, some additional back and forth about nocturnal wildlife. There's definitely a balance here, and that's, you know, the back and forth in the comments definitely illustrates this. I can speak to you as someone that rides the trail at night with lights, that if you're comfortable riding the trail in the evening, it's a very unique experience. It's a lot of fun, but it's not for everybody. A lot of people don't feel safe out there. Just the same, those lights serve an important purpose. So there's definitely a balance, and we're trying to ride that fine line of, we don't want to just blast everything with stadium lights, but at the same time, we know that there are detrimental aspects to having lights that bright that change the experience fundamentally. So how do we provide sorts of safety improvements through specific downlighting, trail lower lighting, to solve these issues for everybody involved? So please tell us where you think those areas are that are safety issues, where you think we need lights, where we don't need lights. We'd love to hear your comments, because that's the only way we're ever going to reach a consensus on this, is to find out what you think. So please pass those on. Another question: how can we get more tunnels of vegetation on the south side like we have on the north part? Great question. I mean, I alluded that to a degree, that getting the southern end up to this level of quality that people really enjoy on the northern end, it's sort of a multi-part thing. I mean, part of it is we have to acknowledge that the southern end, like Isaac alluded to, is just simply a different character of trail. There's a lot more concrete, there's more businesses. You can see on the map here how the lots and the intersections really start to spread out, and they're less dense. This is kind of in the center, really more of a residential area. It's a residential fabric. We're never going to have exactly what we have on the northern end of the trail, on the southern end of the trail. That said, can we put better landscaping and can we start to improve it in a way that's tangible, that people can understand and appreciate? Absolutely. It's imperative that we do that and improve that southern end of the trail to make people comfortable to come down there, to onboard down there, to offboard down there, to turn it more and more into a destination. So we would definitely love to see that and appreciate your comments that you want to see more vegetation on the southern end of the trail. Because as much as we would like to just say, tomorrow we're going to plant trees every 15 feet up and down the 4.5 mile stretch, that's just not possible. So it's going to have to be a strategic effort. So identifying areas that you think are the most important is going to be one of those first steps, finding what those priorities are. So if the southern end is a priority, tell us that in the chat. Tell us that in your survey responses so that we can address those things. Another question just came in. BK Snyder, I don't think most people know that Fair Park is open to walkers and bikes. I had some most pleasant bike rides in the early evening. How do we get connection to the park from the trail improved and get the word out? BK, I'll tell you a short anecdote. When I moved to Dallas, I accepted my job on the stairs of the Hall of State. So I absolutely understand. I was on a bike ride, the phone call came in. It's an amazing place to ride your bike. It's quiet. It's an amazing asset. We're partnering very closely with Fair Park First Organization, City of Dallas, Parks and Rec, to improve that connection and make the most of our adjacency to them. So part of that is wayfinding. Part of that is improving that intersection at the number 7 on the map there, where you have to cross a dart line, you have to cross multiple lanes of traffic. It's not very clear. We actually have a meeting tomorrow with the Fair Park First group, and these are the sorts of things we're going to be talking about. So I appreciate your comments. We absolutely agree that Fair Park is a tremendous asset that we are very fortunate to be directly adjacent to and to potentially connect directly to. So not something that is going to fall by the wayside. Again, there's so many good ideas. To a certain degree, it's where does the priorities lie? So your input and telling us what you think are the biggest priorities is going to help us make these decisions. So please share that kind of thing with us. Oh, getting down to the end here. Sarah Mendoza, what cultural design features are being considered to reflect the diversity of the neighborhoods along the trail, art, seating, gathering areas? That's a great question, Sarah. We know that definitely people use the trail differently in different parts of the trail, and that is reflective of the kind of people that live in those neighborhoods, which, like we showed, I think there's 14. Don't go back and count them because I probably got that wrong. There's a very wide range of neighborhoods with different economic situations, different language situations, different cultural situations. We definitely want to acknowledge that. And part of that process is forming better relationships of our group with the neighborhood groups that are representing those people, getting them involved with our group more, whether it's through bringing them onto committees, talking to them more at tabling events. But I think there could be in terms of what these arts and mural plans are, it could be part of a long-range plan to start to make sure those groups are contributing and making sure that their vision and their culture and their identity is reflected in the types of visual images and the kinds of assets that they want to see on the trail. So definitely an important comment. And to that same effect, Sarah, I think you sent another question digitally that I have here. Is there opportunity? No, that's not it. What material will be available in Spanish to include translation in public meetings? So this is kind of a housekeeping question, but important for everybody to understand. We very much acknowledge that there's a large portion of Spanish-speaking people along the trail. Obviously, I'm not speaking in Spanish now. The presentation has not been in Spanish to date. As much as we would like to translate every bit of this document into Spanish, we don't have the resources for that. But that said, we're doing tabling with native Spanish speakers over the next few weekends. We've translated our survey into Spanish and made that easily accessible via our website. Sarah, I know you personally have pushed our message out in Spanish to your network, and we're very grateful for that. And we're also going to be translating our Q&A, all the questions that have been asked tonight that I've been answering along with the other presenters into Spanish as well. So we welcome any additional ideas about how to better reach communities that speak other languages other than English. How do we reach people
Samuel?
that, yes, please.
This is Jesse.
Please,
If you
Jesse.
guys partner with my office, we can try to get you a translator for those individuals. So if
That
you
would be
with
great.
me, we'll work on that. And real quick, on Fair Park Connection, we are working with Councilmember Basil Dua to make sure we have a safe crossing from the trail into the park. So that's in the works.
Awesome. We'd love to be part of that discussion, and definitely getting involved with District 7 in general. Love to be part of those discussions. I feel like I'm talking a lot here. Can there be natural history in ecoregion signage put up? For example, can we showcase unusual native species like the Texas river cane on Brookside by Mountain? There was another comment I saw earlier about, I'm going to butcher it because I don't have it pulled up anymore, but just interesting cultural history along the trail, because it does have a unique history, and there are these sort of stories that are unique to the trail itself and this linear stretch. We're very interested in that. We're very interested in telling these stories, preserving these sorts of artifacts and narratives. If you have something specific, if you have a story that you think is unique, that maybe even only you know, tell us about it. Send it to us. We'd love to know more. We'd love to work with people. If there's someone in the community that feels like, I want to be the one to spearhead that, I want to work with the Friends of the Santa Fe Trail to lead that effort, we'd love to have you. We're a volunteer board. We all have day jobs. These are all big priorities to us. And if you want to help us make these stories louder, to make them more visible to the trail community, please help us. Please join this effort. Please share what you know, and we can do this together. So appreciate your comment. I've got all the open questions on here answered. There is one more I have online here. Is there opportunity to front businesses and residential uses to the trail similar to the Katy Trail? Generally speaking, yes. Obviously, the fabric that we have here is a little bit different than the Katy Trail. We're going through a lot of different neighborhoods as well. Katy Trail does as well, but acknowledging that this is a different place, a different scale, is certainly a good starting point. So to a certain degree, we think that increased awareness and trail usership will accomplish some of this in terms of creating new opportunities for business frontages and economic business partnerships along the trail. People will flock to the trail, and businesses will flock to the trail because that's where the people are. We are actively looking to form better partnerships with the business communities that do exist. If you remember the slide from the beginning, which again, this will all be available online. Some of those business communities are directly adjacent to the trail. Some of them are a ways off the trail and can only be accessed through wayfinding and complete streets and multimodal transportation along the way. So that's something we're very interested in, because it only makes the trail experience richer if you can go to the trail and then go somewhere else and vice versa. So the more people know about the trail, we think that it's a self-reinforcing process. So great question, something we're thinking about for sure. And with that said, my voice is fading, and I think there's no more open questions. I'm going to pass the mic to Amanda, who's going to talk a little bit about next steps, how you can get more involved, where you can follow along, and that will be a wrap for today. So I'm not going to talk anymore, so I'm going to say my thank you to everyone that joined. I appreciate your time and being here. Amanda, please close this out.
Thank you, Samuel. Great job. Yay. You've done an excellent job as our VP and heading up the master plan. It's been a lot of tireless work. Thank you guys for all attending. My name is Amanda Domask. I am our secretary and head of fundraising, and I wanted to share with you how you can get involved. So the first way is to donate. If you have a vision and you're like, I want more water fountains, more benches, I want to see lighting, I don't want to see lighting, I want to see whatever it is, you can give funds, and that is how we are able to produce these enhancements. So support a bench, water fountain. The second way is doing what you're doing right now, which is getting feedback, which is fantastic. Giving feedback in the chat box has been awesome, but also linktr.ee/FOSFT, Friends of Santa Fe Trail. That is where our survey is. That is the first survey. We're going to have another one that's going to be a little bit more of a deep dive. So continue coming to these input sessions, continue giving your feedback on surveys. That is going to make all the difference. That is another way you can get involved. Thirdly, join our team. So Sarah Mendoza is on this call today. Thank you, Sarah. She is one of our community committee members. So you don't have to be directly on the board. You do not have to give financially to join the team. You can be one of our community committee members. So you can join events, marketing, you can join community and government relations, fundraising. So you can join our team and you can have an impact on the Friends of Santa Fe Trail and what happens with the Santa Fe Trail. So with that said, you can give funds, you can give feedback, and you can join the team. I want to thank you all for being here today. I'm going to say thank you to Mike and Isaac from Studio Outside, Jared from City of Dallas, Councilmember Moreno, and Ridley, Parks Board Member Amanda Scholes. And I'm going to say some of the other folks that are here tonight that have chatted in the chat box, because I really appreciate you guys. Giovanni, Gerald, Adam, Amanda, Will, Jeff, BK, Tom, Allison, Daniel, Marilee, Kyle, Christy, William, David, Sarah Mendoza. Like, great job, guys. The presentation and the Q&A will be on our Linktree in the next couple of days. And I'm going to stay on with our board members for a couple more minutes to answer any more questions that you guys might have about the next steps. But thank you again. Follow us on social media, Friends of Santa Fe Trail, to learn more about what we're doing. Thank you for being here tonight.
Night, everyone. Thank you.